I need to tell you about the Thursday afternoon that changed everything. Not in the dramatic way you might expect. There was no screaming, no breaking glass, no confrontation. Just me, sitting in my corner office on the 7th floor, halfway through a cold brew that had gone bitter, staring at an email from Shanice in HR. The subject line read, "Application flagged for your review, last name match." My company gets maybe 200 applications a month. I don't personally review them. That's what I have an HR director for, what I have department heads for. I built systems specifically so I wouldn't become a bottleneck, so I could focus on strategy and growth and the kind of leadership that actually matters. But Shanice is thorough, and she's protective of me in the way that good people are when they sense you've survived something you don't talk about. So when she saw the name on the application, his name, my last name, the one I haven't used in 10 years, she flagged it. I remember the sound of my office in that moment. The low hum of the HVAC, the muted clicking from the open-plan workspace beyond my glass walls, someone laughing at a joke I couldn't hear. Normal sounds. A normal day. And then I opened the PDF attachment and time did that thing it does when your brain can't process what your eyes are seeing. Robert J. Crawford. My father. Applying for a senior project manager position at my company. My hands started shaking before I'd even finished reading his name. I set the coffee down carefully, watching a tiny wave slosh against the side of the cup, and I just stared. His resume was professionally formatted. Someone had helped him with that, probably some outplacement service or a career counselor. 10 years ago, he would have been too proud for that. The work history was all there. Owner and operator of Crawford Manufacturing Solutions, 1985 to 2023. 38 years of running his own shop, being his own boss, answering to no one. The dates told me what the resume didn't. The business had closed. Recently. I scrolled down to his cover letter, and that's when I felt the first hot prick behind my eyes. I am writing to express my strong interest in the senior project manager position at Catalyst Systems Group. It began, in that overly formal way people write when they're pretending they're not desperate. With over 3 decades of leadership experience in manufacturing and operations, I am confident I would bring invaluable expertise to your team. Invaluable expertise, looking for a new challenge, eager to contribute to a growing organization. Not a single word about failure. Not a whisper of why a man who'd owned his own company for nearly 40 years was suddenly applying to work for someone else. Just confidence and buzzwords, and the kind of posturing I'd seen 1,000 times from men who'd never had to rebuild from nothing. I closed the laptop. Outside my window, the city stretched out in every direction, glass towers catching the afternoon sun, construction cranes pivoting slowly against the skyline, the lake a stripe of dark blue in the distance. I'd moved here 10 years ago with 1 suitcase and $200 in cash. I'd learned every corner of this place the hard way. Which neighborhoods had cheap rent, which coffee shops would let you sit for hours on 1 cup, which bus routes ran late enough to get you home after a closing shift. I'd waited tables and shelved library books and written code at 2 in the morning with my eyes burning from exhaustion. And now I had this, the corner office, my name on the door, not Crawford. I'd changed it legally at 25, my company, my team, my terms. And my father, who told me I'd fail, who said I didn't understand the real world, who gave me an ultimatum and made me choose between his love and my future. He just asked me for a job. I sat there until the sun shifted and the light coming through the window turned golden, and the only thing I could hear in my head, over and over like a damaged recording, was his voice from 10 years ago. If you leave, don't ever come back. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand who I am now before you can understand why this moment felt like the ground opening up beneath me. You need to see what I built, so you can appreciate the bitter poetry of him applying to be a small part of it. My morning had started the way most of them do. Up at 6, 20 minutes of meditation that my therapist convinced me to try and that I'll grudgingly admit actually helps, then a 4-mile run along the lake. I'm not naturally athletic. I'm built like my mother, small-boned and prone to overthinking. But running is the only thing that shuts my brain off long enough to let me think clearly. By 7:30, I was showered and reviewing quarterly projections over scrambled eggs, I'd actually cooked instead of grabbing something on the way. I got to the office by 8:15. Catalyst Systems Group occupies 2 floors of a renovated building in a neighborhood that was industrial wasteland when I first moved here, and is now all exposed brick and craft breweries. We're a tech consulting firm specializing in project management and supply chain software for mid-sized manufacturers, companies too big for off-the-shelf solutions, but too small to afford enterprise systems. It's a niche I understand intimately, for reasons that'll become clear. I have 137 employees. I know most of their names. I know who's got a new baby, who's applying to grad school, who's going through a divorce and needs flexible hours. That's not because I'm exceptionally kind. It's because I remember what it felt like to be invisible to the people who had power over my life. That Thursday, I had a leadership meeting at 9. My executive team, COO, CFO, head of product, head of sales, and Shanice from HR, gathered in the conference room with actually good coffee and the kind of easy rapport that takes years to build. We talked revenue projections, up 18% year-over-year, a potential acquisition target, too early, we agreed, but worth monitoring, and a new parental leave policy Shanice wanted to implement. I listened more than I talked. I learned a long time ago that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the most valuable one. At 10, I had a pitch meeting with a potential client, a regional construction firm looking to overhaul their project tracking systems. The CEO, a guy in his late 50s with the kind of handshake that tries to prove something, clearly expected someone older, someone male. I watched him do the mental recalibration when I stood up from behind the table, all 5'4" of me in a blazer I'd bought to celebrate my first $1 million contract. "You're the founder?" he asked, not quite hiding his surprise. "Founder and CEO," I said, smiling in the way I've perfected, warm but immovable. "I started Catalyst 6 years ago after spending 4 years in consulting. Before that, I worked my way through college in your industry, actually. My first job was doing data entry for a supply company that serviced contractors. I saw firsthand how much time you lose to inefficient systems." I walked him through our platform, highlighted 3 case studies from similar-sized firms, and answered every technical question he threw at me without breaking eye contact. By the end of the hour, he was nodding, asking about implementation timelines, already sold. After he left, my COO, Marcus, who I promoted from department head 2 years ago because he's brilliant and doesn't let his ego get in the way of good ideas, knocked on my open door. "That guy definitely thought I was going to be the CEO," I said. Marcus grinned. "And now he's going to go back to his office and tell everyone he just met with the smartest person in the industry, who happens to be a 32-year-old woman. I love this part. You love watching people underestimate me. I love watching you prove them wrong, every single time. That's the life I've built. Respect, autonomy, a team that has my back, an apartment I chose with furniture I picked out in a neighborhood where no one tells me when to come home or questions my choices. I have friends, real ones, the kind who know the worst parts of me and show up anyway. I have a therapist I see every other week. I have a financial advisor and a retirement account and health insurance I actually understand. I have everything I was told I'd never achieve on my own." And then Shanice's email arrived, and suddenly I was 22 again, standing in my childhood kitchen with a duffel bag at my feet and my father's voice echoing off the walls. But before I tell you about that day, the day I left, you need to understand what I was leaving. You need to know what his love felt like, so you can understand why his job application felt like a fist closing around my throat. I grew up in a mid-sized town about 2 hours from where I live now, the kind of place where everyone knows your family and your business, and the two are essentially the same thing. My father bought Crawford Manufacturing Solutions when I was 3, a small operation making custom metal components for construction and industrial clients. He built it from 20 employees to almost 60 by the time I was in high school. And he ran it the same way he ran our home. His word was law, questioning was insubordination, and love was something you earned through compliance. Dinner was every night at 6:30, all of us at the table. My father at the head, my mother to his right, me and my younger brother filling in the sides. We didn't eat until he'd taken the first bite. We didn't leave until he was finished. And we definitely didn't talk unless we were prepared to be interrogated. "What'd you get on that chemistry test?" he'd ask me, cutting into his pork chop with surgical precision. 94, I'd say, and I'd watch his eyebrows rise just slightly. "What happened to the other 6 points?" "Not good job, not I'm proud of you. Just the immediate identification of the gap, the failure, the evidence that I wasn't quite good enough." My brother Jake was easier for him. Jake liked sports, liked working with his hands, wasn't interested in college. By 16, he was working weekends at the shop, learning how to run the machines, talking about taking over the business someday. My father would clap him on the shoulder and call him my right hand, and Jake would glow under it. I was harder to categorize. I was good at school, scholarship good, valedictorian good, but I was also too questioning, too sensitive, too interested in things that didn't have obvious financial applications. When I wanted to take an art class in 10th grade, my father vetoed it. "That's a hobby, not a skill," he said. "You want to paint, do it on your own time. School is for things that matter." When I got excited about a summer program for aspiring engineers at the state university, he shut it down. "You don't need some fancy camp to learn how the world works. You need real experience. You'll work at the shop." So I did. I spent my summers in the front office of Crawford Manufacturing, doing data entry and filing and answering phones, watching my father command the floor. He was good at what he did, I'll give him that. He knew his clients, knew his product, could troubleshoot a production problem in minutes, and everyone deferred to him. Employees, vendors, even clients. He had that kind of presence, the kind that fills a room and makes you forget there are other ways to lead. At home, my mother was a shadow. She'd been a nurse before she married him, but he didn't like the hours, didn't like her working nights, and eventually she quit. She kept the house, managed the schedules, stayed quiet during his lectures. Once, when I was maybe 15, I asked her why she never disagreed with him. "It's easier this way," she said, not meeting my eyes. "He works hard, he provides, this is just how marriage works, honey." I remember thinking, even then, not for me, never for me. There was one memory I held onto for years, a piece of evidence that maybe he loved me the way I needed. I was 12, and I'd won a regional math competition, beat out kids from schools 3 times the size of mine. They gave me a trophy and a $50 savings bond, and when I brought it home, my father looked at the trophy for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, and said, "That's my girl, you've got my brains." I floated on that for months. Looking back now, I can see it for what it was. He was proud of his own genetics, not my effort. But at 12, I didn't know the difference. I just knew I'd made him happy, and I wanted to do it again. So I kept trying. Straight A's, leadership positions, scholarships and awards, and every marker of success a small-town high school could offer. And every single time, he'd find the flaw. The one point I missed, the slightly more prestigious award I didn't win. The college that offered a partial scholarship instead of a full ride. "You're good," he'd say, "but you don't know how good you need to be to make it out there." Out there, as if the world beyond his control was some hostile wilderness I couldn't possibly navigate. By the time I was a senior, the plan was clear. His plan, not mine. I'd go to community college part-time while working full-time at Crawford Manufacturing. Maybe get a business degree eventually, something practical. Maybe take on more responsibility at the shop. Maybe, someday, run operations while Jake handled production. My entire future, mapped out in service to his vision. And I almost accepted it. That's the part that still scares me. I almost believed him when he said I wasn't ready for anything bigger. Then I got the letter. It came in a thick envelope in early March of my senior year, the kind of envelope that means good news. I remember pulling it out of the mailbox on a Wednesday afternoon, seeing the state university seal embossed in the corner, and my hands going numb. I didn't open it in the driveway. I took it to my room, closed the door, sat on the edge of my bed, and carefully slid my finger under the seal. "We are pleased to offer you the Presidential Scholarship for Academic Excellence. Full tuition, 4 years, Renewable as long as I maintained a 3.5 GPA. Room and board weren't covered, but there were work-study options, meal plan assistance, a list of resources as long as my arm. It was everything. It was possible. I read the letter 6 times, then I let myself cry, quiet, gulping tears of relief and terror in equal measure. Because I knew what this meant. I knew what I was going to have to do. I waited until after dinner to tell them. My stomach had been in knots all through the pot roast and mashed potatoes, through my father's dissection of some supplier issue at the shop, through Jake's story about a girl he'd asked out. My mother had noticed. She kept glancing at me with that worried crease between her eyebrows, but she didn't ask. When my father pushed his plate back and picked up his coffee, I said, "I need to tell you something." The table went quiet. Jake looked up from his phone, my mother's hands stilled on her napkin. "I got a scholarship," I said. "To state, full tuition for 4 years, it's a really big deal. They only give out 15 of them." I watched my father's face. I was expecting surprise, maybe even a flicker of pride before the inevitable objections. What I got was a tightening around his mouth, a hardness in his eyes. "A scholarship," he repeated. "The presidential scholarship, for academic excellence. I'd study business and information systems, and there are internship programs, and state's 3 hours away." "I know. I'd live on campus at least the first year, and then you'd leave." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I felt my mother's tension from across the table, the way she'd gone very still. Jake was staring at his plate. "It's an incredible opportunity," I said, and I hated how my voice shook. "It's a top program, and with the scholarship it wouldn't cost." "Wouldn't cost money," my father interrupted. "But it'd cost time. For years you could be building real skills, real experience. For years you'd waste in classrooms learning theory from people who have never run a business in their lives." "Dad, it's a business degree, and the information systems concentration, that's the future. Everything's going digital, even manufacturing, and if I can learn." "You can learn here." His voice was rising now, the way it did when he'd made up his mind and couldn't believe you were still arguing. "You think I built this company with a degree? You think some professor who's never met a payroll can teach you better than I can?" "It's not about better or worse," I tried. "It's about options, about having credentials that—" "Credentials?" He spat the word like it tasted bad. "You want to know what credentials matter? Results. Loyalty. Showing up every day and doing the work. That's what I've tried to teach you, but you've always thought you were too smart for this family, haven't you?" The accusation hit like a slap. "That's not fair." "What's not fair is you standing here telling me you're going to abandon everything I've built, everything I've given you to chase some fantasy. You have a job waiting for you, a future, right here, but that's not good enough for you." "I'm not abandoning anything. I'm trying to build something for myself." "For yourself?" He stood up, his chair scraping loud against the floor. "That's what this is about, selfishness. After everything your mother and I have sacrificed, every opportunity we've given you, you want to throw it in our faces and run off to play college student." My mother reached out, her hand hovering near his arm. "Robert, maybe we should." "Stay out of this," he said, not looking at her. I was standing now too, my hands clenched at my sides. "I'm 18. This is my choice." "And you're making the wrong one." He stepped closer, and I had to force myself not to back away. "You think you know how the world works. You think you're ready to be on your own. You're a kid. You have no idea how hard it is out there, how many people fail because they're not prepared. I'm trying to protect you from that." "I don't want to be protected," I said, and my voice cracked. "I want a chance." "You have a chance, here." "No, I have your asterisk plan for me. That's not the same thing." The silence after that was brutal. My father stared at me, his face red, his jaw working. Jake had actually left the table. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, the closing of his bedroom door. My mother was crying silently, tears tracking down her face while she gripped her napkin. When my father finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, worse than the yelling. "Let me make this very clear," he said. If you walk out that door to chase this fantasy, if you choose some school over this family, you don't get to come crawling back when it falls apart. You don't get to fail and come home. You're either part of this family or you're not. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Dad, I'm not finished. He crossed his arms. You leave for that school, you're on your own, completely. No money, no safety net. No crawling back for Sunday dinners or raiding the fridge when your meal plan runs out. You want to be an adult. You want to make your own choices. Fine, but you don't get to have it both ways. You're saying if I accept the scholarship, I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm saying if you walk away from this family, don't ever come back. I looked at my mother, desperate for her to say something, to intervene, to tell him he was being insane. She was still crying, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom, I whispered. You're breaking your father's heart, she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. I stood there in that kitchen, the kitchen where I'd eaten 1,000 meals, where I'd done homework at the counter and baked Christmas cookies and learned how to crack eggs, and I understood that there was no compromise coming, no middle ground. He'd backed me into a corner, and the only way out was through. Okay, I said. My father's eyebrows rose. Okay, you'll stay. Okay, I'm leaving. His face went hard as stone. Then you're making your choice. You're making me choose, I said, and I was crying now too, angry tears that I wiped away with the back of my hand. You're the one giving the ultimatum. I'm just trying to go to college. Get out of my sight, he said. I went upstairs. I lay on my bed in the dark, shaking, waiting for footsteps, waiting for my mother to knock on the door, for my father to cool down and come talk, for someone to tell me this was all a bluff. No one came. The next morning, I started packing. I didn't have much, clothes mostly, my laptop that I'd bought myself with money from a summer job, books, a few photos, the jewelry my grandmother had left me. I fit it all into 2 duffel bags and a backpack. I moved quietly, methodically, while the house woke up around me. I heard my father leave for work at 6:30, the garage door grinding open and closed. Jake left for school. My mother was in the kitchen when I came downstairs with my bags. She turned when she heard me, her face pale and puffy from crying. You're really going, she said. I have to. You don't. You could stay. You could go to community college like he said, and in a few years. In a few years, I'll be stuck here forever. I set the bags down. Mom, please, tell me you understand. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her expression, regret, maybe, or recognition. For just a second, I thought she was going to hug me, tell me to go, tell me she was proud. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. There's $200 in there, she said. It's all I have in cash. Don't tell your father. I took it, my hands shaking. Come with me. Honey, I can't. Why not? Because this is my life. She said it so simply, like it was obvious. I know you don't understand. Maybe someday you will. I'll never understand, choosing someone who treats you like this. Her face closed off. Be careful out there, she said, and she turned back to the sink. I picked up my bags and walked out the front door. I put everything in the trunk of my 12-year-old Honda, the one I'd bought myself for $1,500. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the house. A nice house, brick with white trim, a 2-car garage, and a lawn my father paid someone to maintain. It looked perfect from the outside. I backed out of the driveway, and I didn't look back. For the first week, I kept expecting the phone to ring. I was staying with my best friend from high school, sleeping on her couch while I waited for the dorms to open. I kept my phone on full volume, jumped every time it buzzed. I thought maybe my father would cool down. Maybe my mother would call and say he wanted to talk. The only call I got was from Jake, 3 days after I left. They changed the locks, he said. What? Dad changed the locks, and Mom boxed up the stuff you left behind. It's in the garage. I closed my eyes. Did he say anything? He said you made your choice. Jake was quiet for a second. For what it's worth, I think you're being stupid, but good luck, I guess. He hung up. I cried for an hour. Then I dried my face, and I started filling out work-study applications. The first 2 years were brutal in a way I don't think I can fully articulate. Brutal like waking up at 5 a.m. to work a opening shift at a campus coffee shop, then going to class until 3, then studying in the library until your evening shift shelving books. Brutal like choosing between buying the required textbook or eating more than ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for a week. Brutal like being 19 years old and getting the flu and having no one to call, no one to bring you soup or check if you're breathing. I lived in the cheapest dorm, then the cheapest off-campus apartment I could find, a room in a house with 5 other students, 1 bathroom between us, a kitchen where someone's moldy leftovers were always rotting in the fridge. I worked 25 hours a week and carried a full course load. I didn't go to parties. I didn't join clubs. I didn't date. I was too tired, too broke, too focused on the simple fact of survival. There were moments I almost broke. Like the time my landlord raised the rent $40 and I had to pick up extra catering shifts, hauling trays of appetizers at corporate events and wedding receptions, smiling while lawyers and salespeople got drunk and ignored me. Or the time I got a tooth infection and had to go to the emergency dental clinic because I didn't have insurance, and they put me on a payment plan I'd be chipping away at for 2 years. Or the Thanksgiving of my sophomore year, when I couldn't afford to go anywhere and the campus was a ghost town, and I ate a turkey sandwich alone in my apartment while scrolling through Facebook. That's when I saw them, the photos my mother had posted. The whole family gathered around the table, my father at the head, Jake and his new girlfriend, my aunt and uncle and cousins. The caption read, "Grateful for family." I wasn't in a single photo. It was like I'd been erased. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I was better off. But I cried anyway, ugly crying into my pillow while the heating pipes clanked and my roommate's music thumped through the wall. But here's what I didn't expect. I was good at this. Not at the struggling, nobody's good at being broke and alone, but at the work, at the learning. My first semester, I took an Intro to Information Systems course almost by accident, needed it to fill a requirement. The professor was a woman in her 50s named Dr. Reeves, who'd spent 20 years in corporate IT before burning out and going into academia. She taught like someone who'd actually lived in the world, not just studied it. And when I turned in my first project, a system analysis of a fictional manufacturing company, she asked me to stay after class. "Where'd you learn to think like this?" she asked, tapping my paper. "Like what?" "You see inefficiencies most undergrads don't even know to look for. You understand how information flows in an organization. That's not something you get from a textbook." "I grew up around a manufacturing company," I said carefully. "I worked in the office." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "There's a paid research assistant position opening up in my lab next semester. It's competitive, but I think you should apply. You'd be analyzing data systems for local businesses, helping them optimize workflows. 20 hours a week pays better than food service." I got the position. It changed everything. Suddenly I was doing work that mattered, work that used my brain instead of just my ability to show up and follow orders. I was learning database management, process optimization, how to interview stakeholders and map out systems. Dr. Reeves mentored me, pushed me, introduced me to people in the field. When I told her I couldn't afford to go to a professional conference, she got me a student scholarship. When I was struggling with a statistics class, she connected me with a tutor. "Why are you helping me?" I asked her once. "Because someone helped me," she said simply. "And because you're the kind of student who actually wants to learn, not just get a grade. Those are rare." By junior year, I had an internship at a consulting firm in the city, a real internship, paid, the kind that goes on your resume. I took the bus 2 hours each way, 3 days a week, and I absorbed everything. I learned how consultants talk, how they think, how they turn observations into recommendations worth 6 figures. I learned that businesses will pay enormous amounts of money for someone to come in and tell them things their own employees have been saying for years. They just need it packaged the right way, delivered by someone with the right credentials. I was building those credentials, slowly, painfully, but I was building them. Senior year, the same consulting firm offered me a full-time position starting after graduation. $48,000 a year plus benefits. It felt like a fortune. I wanted to call my father and tell him. I wanted to prove that I'd made it, that he'd been wrong, that I wasn't a failure. Instead, I called Dr. Reeves. She took me out for coffee and told me she was proud of me. It didn't fill the hole where my father's approval should have been, but it helped. I graduated with a 3.87 GPA and $17 in my bank account. No one from my family came to the ceremony. I told myself that was fine. I told myself I'd built a new life, found new people. I told myself their absence didn't matter. But I still looked for them in the crowd. 4 years at the consulting firm taught me two critical things. First, I was genuinely good at this, at understanding how businesses work, at identifying problems and designing solutions, at explaining complex systems in ways that made sense to people who just wanted their operations to run smoother. I got promoted twice, built a client base, earned bonuses that let me finally stop living paycheck to paycheck. And second, there was a gap in the market that no one was filling. I saw it over and over in my client work. We'd get hired by these massive corporations, Fortune 500 companies with budgets bigger than some countries, and we'd deploy these sophisticated, customized systems. But the firms I actually understood, the ones that reminded me of my father's world, couldn't afford us. Mid-sized manufacturers, regional construction companies, family-owned operations trying to modernize. They'd call us, hear the price tag, and go back to running everything on spreadsheets and prayer. The off-the-shelf software wasn't much better. It was either too simplistic or designed for enterprises, nothing that fit the weird middle space these companies occupied. I started sketching out ideas. What if someone built a platform specifically for that market? Sophisticated enough to actually solve their problems, but modular and affordable enough that a company with 50 to 200 employees could actually implement it. What if you combined good software with actual consulting, people who understood the industry and could help with the change management piece? I was 27 when I started seriously planning it, 28 when I made the leap. I'd saved $70,000, lived like I was still in college, dumped everything into savings, built a cushion. I found a technical co-founder through a women in tech meetup, a brilliant engineer named Priya who was as tired of corporate life as I was. We split equity 50-50, rented desks at a co-working space, and started building. I named the company Catalyst Systems Group, not Crawford, not anything connected to the family I'd left behind. Something new, something mine. The first year, we almost died 6 times. We had 1 client, then lost them, then got 2 more, then couldn't make payroll and had to defer our own salaries. I was working 80-hour weeks, pitching anyone who'd listen, living on adrenaline and cold brew and the sheer refusal to prove my father right by failing. I had panic attacks in the bathroom of the co-working space. I stress ate or forgot to eat entirely. I went on exactly 2 dates and ghosted both guys because I couldn't spare the mental energy. But we didn't die. We got a client, then another. We hired our first employee, a customer success manager who believed in what we were building, then a salesperson, then 2 more engineers. We moved into a real office, a tiny one, but with a door that locked and a coffee maker that belonged to us. By the time I turned 30, we had 15 employees and annual revenue just over $1 million. By 31, we'd landed a major contract with a regional construction firm, the kind of client that opened doors to 10 more. We hired aggressively. I brought in an experienced COO because I was smart enough to know what I didn't know. We moved into a bigger office. We got written up in a business journal as one of the city's fastest-growing tech companies. And by 32, we had 137 employees, 2 floors of a renovated building, and revenue that would hit $15 million by year's end. I got the corner office that spring. The real estate agent walked me through the space, pointing out the features, the windows on 2 sides, the view of the lake, the built-in bookshelves, and I just stood there feeling like an imposter. Like someone was going to walk in and tell me there'd been a mistake. I wasn't actually supposed to be here. But no one did. I moved in on a Saturday, brought in my books and my diplomas, and the one photo I kept, me and Dr. Reeves at my graduation, both of us grinning. I hung it where I could see it from my desk. Then I sat in my chair, the expensive ergonomic one Priya had insisted I get, and I looked out at the city I'd conquered one brutal inch at a time. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. And the only thing I felt, under the pride and the exhaustion and the disbelief, was a deep, aching sadness. Because I wanted to call my father. I wanted to show him this office, this company, this life I'd built from nothing. I wanted him to see that I wasn't the naive kid he'd dismissed. I wanted him to say he was wrong, that he was sorry, that he was proud. But I knew he never would. So I sat in my corner office, in the chair I'd earned, and I cried for the relationship I'd never have. Then I wiped my face, opened my laptop, and got back to work. That was 4 months before his application landed on my desk. 4 months before I had to decide what to do about the man who told me to never come back, now asking me for a place in the life he said I'd never build. I didn't sleep that night. I went home to my apartment. The one bedroom I'd decorated exactly how I wanted, all soft grays and plants I'd somehow managed to keep alive. And I sat on my couch with my laptop and a glass of wine I didn't drink, and I started digging. LinkedIn first. His profile was bare bones, almost embarrassing for someone who'd run a business for nearly 40 years. A generic headshot that looked like it had been taken at a Walgreens portrait studio. The headline read, "Experienced Operations Executive Manufacturing Leadership Process Optimization." The kind of buzzword soup that screamed desperation. His work history listed Crawford Manufacturing Solutions with the end date of March 2023. 6 months ago. Nothing since then, just that gap and the suddenly hopeful, seeking new opportunities in his summary. I clicked through to the company page. It was still up but marked as permanently closed. 10 employees listed, though I knew at the peak he'd had closer to 60. I scrolled through the sparse updates, a post from 2 years ago about a new client contract, one from 3 years back about a community service award. Nothing about the closing. No farewell post, no acknowledgement, just silence. I opened a new tab and searched for news. It took some digging, local outlets, trade publications, the regional business journal, but I found it. A small article from April, the kind of thing that barely registers unless you're looking for it. Crawford Manufacturing Solutions, a 38-year-old metal fabrication company, has filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and ceased operations, citing supply chain disruptions and increased competition. Owner Robert Crawford declined to comment. Approximately 15 employees were laid off. 15 employees left at the end. He'd already been bleeding out for years. I sat back, processing. My father's company, the empire he'd built, the thing he'd been so sure was more valuable than my education, the family legacy he'd tried to trap me in, was gone. Dead. Liquidated. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt some grim satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. I kept digging. Found a notice of asset sale from the bankruptcy proceedings, equipment auctioned off, the building sold to a developer. Found my brother's LinkedIn. Jake worked at a competing manufacturing firm now, some mid-level sales position. His profile had that same desperate optimization, the same open to opportunities signal. The whole family had collapsed. I thought about my mother, still in that house unless they'd lost that too. I thought about my father, who'd spent 40 years being the absolute authority, the man with all the answers, watching it all crumble. Then I went back to his application, and I read it again with new eyes. The cover letter was so carefully constructed. Not a single mention of failure or bankruptcy, or the fact that his entire professional identity had evaporated 6 months ago. Just confident assertions about his extensive leadership background and his proven track record of operational excellence. He'd listed his job search as beginning in late 2023. Like this was a choice, a casual transition, not the desperate scramble it actually was. And nowhere, not in the resume, not in the cover letter, not in the LinkedIn profile I just examined, was there any indication he knew who owned Catalyst Systems Group. I tested the theory, Googled my company's leadership. The website listed our executive team with photos and bios. There I was, Sarah Chen, founder and CEO. Chen, my mother's maiden name, the one I'd legally adopted at 25 when I couldn't stand seeing Crawford on my driver's license anymore. The photo was professional, recent, showed me in a blazer with my hair up. Had he even looked at the website? Or had he been so desperate, firing off so many applications, that he hadn't bothered to research the company beyond confirming they were hearing? I pulled up our application tracking system and looked at his submission timestamp. 11:43 p.m. on a Wednesday. Late-night panic applying, probably going through every job board listing, spraying his resume at anything that seemed remotely appropriate. He had no idea. He'd applied to his estranged daughter's company without even realizing it. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Almost. I closed the laptop at 2 in the morning and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My brain wouldn't shut off, just kept spinning through scenarios. I could ignore the application. Have Shanna send a standard rejection email, and he'd never know how close he'd come. I could end this right now. But that felt hollow, like letting him off too easy. I could have someone call him, tell him his daughter was the CEO, deliver the rejection with that context. But that felt cruel in a way that didn't sit right, even after everything. Or I could. The idea formed slowly, piece by piece. I could interview him. The thought made my chest tight, but it also felt right in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Not revenge, exactly. Something else. Something about balance and boundaries and making him see me, really see me, as the person I'd become. I called in sick the next day. I never call in sick. Shanice texted me immediately asking if I was okay, and I sent back something vague about a migraine. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and I just thought. By noon, I'd called my therapist and begged for an emergency session. Dr. Mitchell had been seeing me for 4 years, ever since a colleague had gently suggested that maybe my perfectionism and people-pleasing tendencies and total inability to set boundaries in my personal life might benefit from professional help. She knew the whole story, the ultimatum, the estrangement, all of it. He applied to your company, she repeated, after I'd spilled the whole thing. He has no idea it's mine. And you're considering interviewing him. I think so, maybe, I don't know. I was packing my living room. Is that insane? What would the purpose be? I stopped. I want him to see what I built. I want him to face the daughter he threw away and realize that I made it, that he was wrong. Is that all? I sank onto the couch. I want to know if he's changed, if he's capable of accountability, if losing everything taught him anything. And if he hasn't changed, then I want to tell him no myself. Not through some HR form letter. I want him to know that I had the power to help him and I chose not to, the same way he chose to cut me off. Dr. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. That's honest, but I need you to think about what this might cost you emotionally. You've built significant boundaries. You've processed a lot of grief. Inviting him back into your orbit, even in a controlled setting, could reopen wounds. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you sound like the 22-year-old who kept hopping he'd call and apologize. The one who checked her phone for years waiting for him to say he was wrong. That hit hard. I'm not that person anymore. No, you're not. You're stronger, more self-aware, more successful than you ever imagined. But he's still your father. And that wound doesn't fully heal just because you're the CEO now. I closed my eyes. So what do I do? That's not for me to decide. But if you're going to do this, you need to be very clear about your boundaries, what you will and won't tolerate, what outcome you're hopping for, and what you'll do if you don't get it. You need to protect yourself, Sarah. He didn't do that for you, so you have to. I spent the rest of the day mapping it out like a business strategy, because that's the only way I know how to handle things that scare me. I made lists. I journaled. I called my best friend, Maya, the one who'd let me sleep on her couch 10 years ago, who knew everything. Are you sure about this? She asked. No, but I think I need to do it anyway. Then do it on your terms. You're in control this time, not him. By evening, I had a plan. I'd have HR schedule him for a standard first-round interview with Marcus, my COO. I'd observe remotely. We had video conferencing equipment in all the conference rooms, and I could watch the feed from my office. If he was terrible, if he was exactly the same arrogant, unaccountable person he'd always been, Marcus would deliver a professional rejection, and that would be the end of it. But if he passed that round, if he showed even a glimmer of growth or humility, I'd bring him in for a final interview, with me, as the CEO. I'd reveal myself in a controlled environment, on my turf, with all the power he'd once held over me now firmly in my hands. I'd assess him as a candidate the same way I'd assess anyone else. And then I'd make my decision based on who he was now, not who I'd needed him to be. It felt fair, it felt boundaried, it felt terrifying. I called Shanice on Monday morning. "Move Robert Crawford's application forward," I said. "Schedule him for a first-round interview with Marcus." There was a pause. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Don't tell him the CEO will be observing. Standard process." "Okay." Another pause. "Sarah, if you need anything." "I know, thank you." I hung up before she could ask more questions. The interview was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. I had 3 days to prepare myself. I didn't tell Marcus the whole story, just that I had a personal interest in this particular candidate and wanted to observe the interview. Marcus had worked for me long enough to know when not to push, so he just nodded and said he'd do his standard evaluation. Thursday arrived with the kind of bright, cold clarity that November sometimes brings. I got to the office early, went through my morning routine like it was any other day. Leadership meeting at 9. Client call at 10:30. Lunch at my desk while I reviewed quarterly projections and tried not to watch the clock. At 1:50, Shanice messaged me. Candidate arrived, in the lobby. My stomach dropped. At 1:55, Marcus walked him to conference room B. I watched on the security camera feed as they passed through the open office space. Marcus in his usual business casual, relaxed and friendly, and next to him, my father. I hadn't seen him in 10 years. Not in person, not in photos except the occasional accidental glimpse on social media before I'd trained myself to stop looking. He looked older. That was the first thing that hit me. He was 62 now, and he looked at gray hair thinning at the crown, lines carved deep around his mouth, a slight stoop to his shoulders that hadn't been there before. He was wearing a suit that looked a size too big, like maybe he'd lost weight or borrowed it from someone. But his walk was the same. That deliberate, heavy stride, the way he took up space like he owned it. I pulled up the video feed from the conference room on my monitor. The camera was mounted discreetly in the corner, angled to capture both sides of the table. Marcus sat down, my father across from him. Through my headphones, I heard Marcus's easy greeting. "Thanks for coming in, Robert. I'm Marcus Chen, COO. I'll be conducting the first round today." Chen, same last name as me. If my father noticed, he didn't show it. "Appreciate the opportunity," my father said, and his voice, God, his voice was exactly the same. Deep and certain, the voice that had told me I wasn't good enough, that I'd fail, that I should never come back. I wrapped my arms around myself and watched. Marcus started with the standard questions. "Tell me about your background. Walk me through your experience. What interests you about this role?" My father answered smoothly, hitting all the expected notes. 38 years in manufacturing, extensive operations leadership, team management, client relations, process improvement. He name-dropped a few major clients Crawford Manufacturing had served, made it sound like he'd been running a thriving enterprise right up until he decided to explore new opportunities. "I see there's a gap in recent employment," Marcus said, his tone neutral. "Can you speak to that?" My father didn't miss a beat. The manufacturing landscape has changed significantly in recent years. Supply chain disruptions, shifting client demands. I made the strategic decision to step back and evaluate the next phase of my career rather than simply react to market conditions. Strategic decision, not bankruptcy, not failure, not the complete collapse of everything he'd built. I felt my jaw clench. Marcus nodded, making notes. And what attracted you to Catalyst specifically? You're doing interesting work in the manufacturing tech space, my father said. I've spent my career in this industry, and I've seen firsthand how critical good systems are. When I saw you were looking for someone with operational expertise, it seemed like a natural fit. It was a good answer. Generic, but good. The kind of thing that would pass muster if you didn't know he was lying. Marcus asked about leadership style. My father talked about firm but fair, and leading by example, and maintaining high standards. All the phrases he'd always used, the ones that sounded reasonable until you lived under them and realized high standards meant nothing you do is ever good enough. Tell me about a time you had to manage a significant failure or setback, Marcus said. I leaned forward. My father shifted in his seat, just slightly. In manufacturing, you're constantly troubleshooting. Equipment failures, quality issues, missed deadlines. The key is staying calm and focusing on solutions rather than blame. Can you give me a specific example? We had a situation years ago where a supplier delivered substandard materials. Rather than panic, I personally went to the client, explained the situation, and worked out a timeline adjustment. We kept the relationship and delivered a superior product. That's the kind of problem-solving I bring. It was a deflection. A story from 20 years ago that had nothing to do with what Marcus was actually asking about. Nothing about the bankruptcy, the layoffs, the business he'd run into the ground. Marcus caught it too. I saw the slight tightening around his eyes, the way he made another note. They talked for another 20 minutes. My father was competent in his answers. He did have real experience, real knowledge. But there was an edge to everything he said. A subtle condescension when Marcus asked about willingness to learn new systems. I'm certainly open to modern approaches, though I find a lot of the fundamentals haven't changed. A dismissiveness when asked about collaboration. I work well with teams, as long as everyone's pulling their weight. And then Marcus asked the question I'd specifically told him to include. Our CEO is relatively young and has built this company from the ground up with a very specific culture. How do you feel about taking direction from someone who might be significantly younger than you and who might approach leadership differently than you're used to? My father smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Age doesn't concern me. What matters is competence. If someone knows what they're doing, I respect that. And if you disagree with a decision, I'd voice my perspective, professionally, but ultimately leadership makes the call. That's how organizations work. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like exactly what you'd want to hear from a candidate. But I knew him. I knew that smile. I knew what I'd voice my perspective meant constant undermining, the drip, drip, drip of I have more experience, and in my day we did it this way, and I'm just trying to help. Marcus wrapped up the interview with the standard closing. We'll be in touch early next week. Any questions for me? Just one, my father said. What's the CEO like? I didn't see much about them on the website. My heart stopped. Marcus didn't miss a beat. Sarah's brilliant. Built this company from nothing, really understands the industry, cares a lot about the team. She's hands-on but trusts people to do their jobs. Best boss I've ever had. Sarah, my first name. If he'd been paying any attention, if he'd looked at the website at all, he'd have seen it. But my father just nodded. Sounds good. Looking forward to learning more. They stood, shook hands. Marcus walked him out. I sat in my office, hands shaking, and waited. 5 minutes later, Marcus knocked on my door. Well, I asked. He came in and closed the door behind him. He's qualified, definitely has the experience, knows the industry. But he's got an ego the size of this building. Marcus sat down across from me. He didn't take accountability for a single mistake, dodged the failure question entirely, and I got the strong sense that he thinks he's doing us a favor by applying, not the other way around. Would you hire him? Marcus looked at me carefully. Under normal circumstances, no, he'd be a culture nightmare. We've spent 6 years building a team that actually communicates, that owns their mistakes, that doesn't play hierarchy games. He'd undermine that in a month. He paused. But these aren't normal circumstances, are they? No. You want to tell me why you're really interested in this candidate? I took a breath. He's my father. Marcus's eyes widened. The father who? Yeah, that one. Jesus, Sarah. He doesn't know I'm the CEO. He doesn't even know I own the company. Marcus leaned back, processing. What do you want to do? I looked out the window at the city I'd conquered, at the empire I'd built from nothing, at the life that was wholly and completely mine. Send him to the final round, I said. With me. Email went out Friday morning. Congratulations, you've been selected for a final round interview with our CEO. Please arrive Tuesday at 2:00 p.m. I had 4 days to prepare myself. I spent the weekend the way I imagine soldiers spend the night before a deployment, quietly, carefully, going through every step of the plan. I picked out my outfit, the charcoal suit I'd worn when I closed our biggest client, the one that made me look every inch the CEO I was. I practiced my breathing exercises. I role-played with Maya, who came over Sunday night and sat across from me at my dining table. Hello, Dad, I said, and my voice cracked. Again, Maya said gently. Hello, Dad. Again. By the 10th time, my voice was steady. What if he walks out? I asked her. Then he walks out, and you let him. What if he tries to hug me? You step back. You're allowed to have physical boundaries. What if he cries? Maya reached across the table and took my hand. Then he cries. That's his emotion to manage, not yours. You don't owe him comfort. You don't owe him anything. Monday night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in bed watching the ceiling fan turn, running through every possible scenario. Would he be angry? Defensive? Would he try to play the victim, act like I was being cruel? Would he even recognize me right away? I'd changed my hair, lost the baby fat in my face, carried myself completely differently than the scared 22-year-old who'd left. At 5 a.m., I gave up and went for a run. The city was dark and quiet, just the streetlights and the occasional early commuter. My feet hit the pavement in a steady rhythm, and I focused on that, just that, the physical reality of my body moving through space. I was here. I was real. I was strong. I'd survived him once. I could survive this. Tuesday crawled by with excruciating slowness. I had meetings I barely registered, a call with a potential investor where I went through the motions on autopilot. At noon, I ate a salad I couldn't taste. At 1:30, I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was put together, professional, successful. Hair in a low bun, subtle makeup, the suit that cost more than my first car. I looked like a CEO. I looked like someone who belonged in that corner office. I looked nothing like the girl he'd thrown away. You've got this, I whispered to my reflection. At 1:50, Shanice called. He's here. Give me 5 minutes, then bring him up. I went to my office and sat behind my desk, arranged my notebook just so, my pen parallel to it, pulled up his resume on my monitor. My hands were shaking, so I pressed them flat against the desk, breathing slowly. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The knock came at exactly 2 p.m. Come in, I said. The door opened. Shanice stepped in first, professional and composed. Sarah, this is Robert Crawford for your 2 o'clock. And then he walked into my office. I stood up slowly, letting him take in the space. The windows, the view, the diplomas on the wall, the photo of me and Dr. Reeves. Letting him see where he was, who had brought him here. Then I stepped out from behind the desk and watched his face as recognition hit. It took 3 seconds. His eyes went from polite interview smile to confusion to shock to something I couldn't quite read. Hello, Dad, I said. The color drained from his face. What? What are you doing here? I'm the CEO. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. This is my company. Please sit down. He didn't move. He just stood there in the doorway, looking between me and Shanice like someone was playing a joke on him. Shanice glanced at me. I nodded slightly. She stepped out and closed the door. We were alone. I don't understand, my father said. You applied for a position at my company. I said, keeping my voice level. I wanted to meet with you personally. Please sit. He moved like he was underwater, slowly lowering himself into the chair. I walked back around my desk and sat down, putting the furniture between us, a physical barrier that felt necessary. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. He'd aged more than I'd realized watching the video feed. Up close, I could see the deep lines around his eyes, the way his collar was slightly too loose, the tremor in his hands before he clasped them together. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. You look different, he finally said. It's been 10 years. You changed your name. Yes. To Chen. Mom's maiden name. I changed it legally when I was 25. I picked up my pen, a grounding gesture. But we're not here to talk about me. You're here interviewing for the senior project manager position. He blinked. You can't be serious. Why not? You submitted an application. You made it through the first round. This is the final interview. I opened his resume on my screen. I have some questions. Sarah. It's Ms. Chen in this context, actually. I looked at him steadily. Or Sarah if you prefer, but we're conducting a professional interview, so I'd like to maintain professional boundaries. I watched him try to recalibrate, his mouth opening and closing. Finally, I didn't know. When I applied, I didn't realize. I know you didn't. Our company name is different, and I don't use Crawford anymore. There's no way you could have known. I scrolled through his resume. But now that you're here, I'd like to ask you the questions I ask every final round candidate. Starting with this, your business closed 6 months ago. You filed for bankruptcy. Why didn't you mention that in your application? His face flushed. That's not the market conditions. I read the bankruptcy filing, Dad. Chapter 7. Full liquidation. 15 employees laid off without severance. I kept my voice gentle, factual. I'm not asking to embarrass you. I'm asking because every candidate who comes through that door, I need to know they can be accountable. So I'll ask again, what happened to Crawford Manufacturing and what did you learn from it? The silence stretched out. I could hear the hum of the building, the distant sound of phones ringing in the outer office, my own heartbeat steady and strong. I didn't adapt fast enough, he said finally, the words clearly costing him. The industry changed. Everything went digital, automated. I thought the old ways would hold. They didn't. What else? His jaw tightened. I was too proud to ask for help, too proud to admit I didn't understand the new systems. By the time I realized how far behind we'd fallen, it was too late. It wasn't a full accounting. There was nothing about his leadership style, his inability to retain good employees, the way he'd driven Jake into the ground trying to make him into a mini version of himself. But it was more than I'd expected. Thank you for that honesty, I said. Next question. Marcus mentioned you have extensive leadership experience. Tell me about your leadership style. I ran a tight ship. High standards, clear expectations. Did your employees feel valued? He stopped. What? Did the people who worked for you feel valued, respected, safe to bring you problems or admit mistakes? I treated people fairly. That's not what I asked. Another long silence. Outside my window, a flock of birds wheeled across the sky, dark against the bright afternoon. No, he said quietly. I don't think they did. I think they were afraid of me. My throat tightened. Why? Because I was afraid, he said, and he sounded surprised by his own words. Afraid of failing, afraid of losing control, afraid of not being enough, so I controlled everything, everyone, and I told myself that was strength. I had to look away for a moment, blinking hard. This was more self-awareness than I'd heard from him in my entire life. One more question, I said, and I need you to be completely honest. Can you work for me? He looked up sharply. Not theoretically, I continued. Not can you work for a younger CEO in the abstract. Can you, Robert Crawford, take direction from me, your daughter, the person you told wasn't ready for the real world? Can you respect my authority in this company I built? Can you handle being an employee in a company where I make the final decisions? I watched him wrestle with it. saw the pride warring with the desperation, the old certainty colliding with new reality. "I don't know," he said. It was the most honest thing he'd said. "Then I don't think this is the right fit," I said gently. His head snapped up. "Sarah, you're qualified on paper. You have real experience, real knowledge. But this company has a very specific culture. We value accountability, collaboration, psychological safety. We've built a team where people admit mistakes, ask for help, and support each other. Based on what I know about your leadership history and what you've told me today, I don't think you'd thrive here. And I don't think the team would thrive with you." "So you're rejecting me?" His voice was flat. "I'm making a hearing decision based on culture fit, the same decision I'd make for any candidate." I paused. "But yes." He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping. "This was all just a power play, wasn't it? Get me in here, humiliate me, prove that you won." "No," I said, standing too but staying behind my desk. "If I wanted to humiliate you, I would have had HR send a form rejection and you never would have known who I became. I brought you here because I wanted to see if you'd changed, if you'd learned anything, if there was any possibility of—" I stopped, steadied my voice. "I wanted to know if you could be accountable, and you were partially, more than I expected, honestly. But not enough. Not enough for me to hire you, no, and not enough for—" I trailed off. "For what?" "For me to want you in my life." The words came out quieter than I intended. "You gave me an ultimatum 10 years ago. You told me if I left, I could never come back. And I didn't. I built a whole life without you. And now you show up, not because you were looking for me, not because you wanted to apologize or make amends, but because you needed a job. And you didn't even know you were asking your daughter." His face crumpled. "I didn't know how to find you. You changed your name, you disappeared." "I was 3 hours away. I've been working in this city for 8 years. My company has been in business journals, trade publications. If you'd wanted to find me, you could have. I thought you didn't want to be found. I didn't want to be disowned." My voice cracked and I hated it, hated that after all this time he could still do this to me. "I didn't want to be told I was making the biggest mistake of my life for going to college. I didn't want to choose between your love and my future. But you made me choose. And then when I chose myself, you erased me." I was angry. "I thought you'd come crawling back when you failed, and then we could." "I didn't fail." I said it firmly, reclaiming my voice. "I didn't fail, Dad. I succeeded. Without you, without your money or your connections or your approval. I worked 2 jobs and put myself through school and built a career and started this company from nothing. Everything you see here, I did myself." He was crying now, silent tears tracking down his face. "I know, I can see that. You're incredible, Sarah. This is incredible." "Don't do that." I shook my head. "Don't tell me I'm incredible now that it benefits you. You had a chance to believe in me 10 years ago. You chose not to." "I was wrong." His voice broke. "I was wrong about everything. About you, about what mattered, about what makes someone strong. I lost the business. I lost my son. Jake barely speaks to me. I lost you. And I did it to myself because I was too proud and too afraid to bend even a little." I wanted to feel triumphant. I wanted this admission to fill the hole he'd carved out of me. It didn't. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "I do, but it doesn't change my decision. I can't hire you, and I can't have you back in my life. Not like this. Not with everything that's still unresolved between us." "What would it take?" He stepped closer to the desk. "What would I have to do?" "I don't know. Therapy, probably. Years of it. Genuine amends, not just to me but to Mom, to Jake, to the employees you laid off without warning. Actual accountability, not just words in a job interview." I met his eyes. "And I'd have to want it. I'd have to decide you're worth the risk of letting you hurt me again. And right now, I don't." He nodded slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I understand." "I hope you find something," I said, and I meant it. "I hope you figure out who you are when you're not in charge of everything. I hope you learn how to be wrong and ask for help and let people in. I really do." "Can I?" He hesitated. "Can I contact you in the future if I do the work?" I thought about it. "Maybe, but not yet. I need more time. And you need to do the work because you want to change, not because you want something from me. Okay. He moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to be, but I am. Thank you, I said. That means something, not enough, but something. He left. I stood in my office, listening to his footsteps retreat down the hallway, and I waited for the feeling to come. The satisfaction, the vindication, the sense of justice served. Instead, I just felt hollow. I sat back down in my chair and I let myself cry. Not the way I'd cried at 22, desperate and heartbroken. This was different. Grief for what could have been. Relief that it was over. Exhaustion from carrying this weight for so long. Shanice knocked softly after a few minutes. Can I come in? Yeah. She entered with a box of tissues and a bottle of water, set them on my desk without a word, and sat down in the chair my father had just vacated. You okay? She asked. No, but I will be. You want to talk about it? I shook my head. Not yet, but thank you. She squeezed my hand and left, closing the door quietly behind her. I pulled out my phone and texted Dr. Mitchell, need a session this week if you have space. Had the conversation. It went. I don't even know. Her response came 2 minutes later. Thursday at 4, I have space. Proud of you. I texted Maya, it's done. Her reply was immediate, coming over tonight with wine and Thai food. No arguments. I put the phone down and looked around my office. My space. My company. My life built exactly how I wanted it, full of people who valued me and work that mattered and autonomy I'd fought for with everything I had. He'd tried to take this from me before I'd even started, and I'd built it anyway. That was worth something. That was worth everything. I took a long drink of water, wiped my face, and opened my laptop. I had work to do. The next few weeks were strange. I felt lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks and finally set it down. But I also felt untethered, like the anger and hurt that had been driving me for so long had evaporated, and I wasn't sure what was left. I spent a lot of time in therapy. Dr. Mitchell helped me process it all, the confrontation, the things he'd said, the accountability he'd shown, and the accountability he hadn't. The fact that part of me still wanted a relationship with him, even after everything, and the fact that I'd chosen myself anyway. That's growth, she said. Wanting connection and still maintaining boundaries. They're not mutually exclusive. It doesn't feel like winning, I admitted. Because it's not about winning, it's about healing. I told Marcus and my core team what had happened, not the details, but enough that they understood why I'd been off my game. They rallied around me in the quiet way good teams do, picking up slack without being asked, checking in without prying, reminding me I didn't have to be perfect. 3 weeks after the interview, I got an email from my mother. The subject line just said, "From Mom," lowercase, like she was afraid I wouldn't open it if she seemed too formal. Sarah asterisk. Your father told me what happened. He came home from the interview and he cried for 2 days. I've never seen him like that. I don't know if this means anything to you, but he's started therapy. He went to his first appointment last Thursday. He's also been going to a job search support group at the community center where they help people who have lost businesses. He's actually talking to people, actually admitting he needs help. I know it's too little too late. I know that. You don't owe us anything. But I thought you should know he's trying. I'm trying too. I'm seeing someone, a counselor at the church, talking about why I stayed quiet all those years, why I didn't protect you the way I should have. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry I gave you $200 and let you walk out that door. I should have fought for you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you don't, I understand that too. I'm proud of what you've built. I always knew you could do anything you set your mind to. Love. Mom asterisk. I read it 3 times, then saved it to a folder and closed my laptop. I wasn't ready to respond. Maybe I would be someday, maybe not. But it was something. A month later, I was sitting in a leadership team meeting when one of our newest hires, a recent grad named Aisha, nervously pitched an idea for improving our client onboarding process. She'd been with us for 6 weeks, and this was her first time speaking up in a big meeting. Her idea was good, really good, the kind of fresh perspective we needed. But I watched her shrink as she presented it, watched her apologize 3 times, watched her preemptively dismiss her own suggestion with, "I know I'm new, so maybe this is stupid, but..." I held up a hand gently. "Stop. Don't apologize and don't call your idea stupid. You saw a problem, you thought about a solution, and you brought it to the team. That's exactly what we want from every person in this company, regardless of how long you've been here." She blinked at me. "Oh, okay. Tell us more about the implementation. How would it work?" She did, and it was brilliant. We adopted a version of her system the following month. After the meeting, she caught me in the hallway. "Thank you," she said, "for not making me feel dumb." "You're not dumb. You're talented and observant. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise." As I walked back to my office, I thought about my father sitting across from me, asking what it would take. And I realized this was part of the answer, building something different, creating the environment I'd never had, using my power to lift people up instead of cutting them down. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't rewrite my childhood or undo the damage he'd done. But I could choose what kind of leader I wanted to be, what kind of person, what kind of life. And I had. So let me tell you what I learned, because if you're listening to this, if you made it all the way through this story, there's probably a reason. Maybe you have a parent who made you choose between their approval and your dreams. Maybe you have someone in your life who only valued you when you were useful to them. Maybe you're building something right now and you're terrified it won't be enough. Here's what I know. You don't owe anyone access to the life they tried to deny you. Read that again. You don't owe them your success, your energy, your forgiveness, or your time. Not your parents, not your ex, not anyone who told you that you weren't good enough and then got angry when you proved them wrong. Boundaries aren't cruelty. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. And you are allowed to succeed wildly, beautifully, completely without the people who doubted you ever getting to witness it. But here's the other thing I learned. Success doesn't heal the wound. The corner office, the money, the moment of vindication when they finally see what you built, it helps. It matters. But it doesn't fill the hole where unconditional love should have been. Therapy does. Time does. Building a chosen family who loves you for who you are, not what you achieve, that does. Learning to parent yourself the way you should have been parented, to give yourself the encouragement and grace and belief you were denied. That's what actually heals you. Document everything. That's a practical one. I built this company on documentation, every contract, every conversation, every decision in writing. And it saved me more times than I can count. If you're in a toxic situation, if you're planning your exit, if you're gathering evidence, document it. Emails, texts, bank statements, performance reviews, you'll be glad you did. Read everything before you sign it. Understand your rights. Ask questions. I spent my early 20s signing leases and agreements I barely understood because I was afraid of looking stupid. Learn from my mistakes. Find mentors. Dr. Reeves changed my life not because she gave me money or connections, though she helped with both, but because she saw me. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Find people like that. Be people like that. And here's the last one, the one I'm still learning. You're allowed to grieve the relationship you wanted, even while you maintain boundaries with the relationship you have. I wanted a father who was proud of me. I still want that, somewhere deep down. But I can want it and still protect myself from the father I actually got. Both things can be true. If you're out there right now, working 2 jobs and eating ramen and wondering if you'll make it, you will. Not because life is fair or because hard work always pays off, but because you're already doing the hardest part. You're already surviving. Everything else is just details. And to everyone who told you that you couldn't, that you wouldn't, that you weren't enough, you don't need to prove them wrong. You just need to build the life that makes you happy. Their opinion stops mattering the moment you stop asking for it. I'm sitting in my corner office right now, looking at the city I conquered one brutal step at a time. My company is thriving. My team is incredible. And my father's application is in a folder marked archived, right where it belongs. This is what winning actually looks like. Not revenge, not vindication, just a life that's wholly, completely, unapologetically mine. So wherever you're listening from, whether it's a corner office or a studio apartment or your car in a parking lot taking a breath before you go face whatever you're facing, I see you. Your story matters, your courage counts, and you're going to make it. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from today. Tell me one boundary you've set or one dream you're chasing. I read every single comment, and this community is incredible about supporting each other. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Tap the hype sticker if you're on that feature. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you don't need their permission to become who you were always meant to be. You just need to start.